The story of Job, faith that cannot be broken. What if I told you about the most faithful man who ever lived? He lost everything he had in just one day. But guess what? He still loved God with all his heart. This isn't a story about getting prizes or things being fair. This is about having faith in God even when super hard things happen. The big question is, can you still love God when everything goes wrong? Picture this. Thunder goes boom across the sky, and lightning lights up the darkness like God's own flashlight. A man kneels down to pray under the twinkling stars, trusting God completely. His name is Job, and people would remember his story forever. But his happy, peaceful life is about to become like a big test between heaven and earth. Will Job still love God when everything gets taken away? In the faraway land of Uz, there lived a wonderful man named Job. Everyone who knew his name smiled when they heard it. Job was super rich. Can you imagine having 7,000 fluffy sheep? Bah, 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 they went, covering the hills like white, woolly clouds. He also had 3,000 camels with little bells going tinkle, tinkle. Plus, he had 1,000 strong oxen and 500 donkeys running around in fields that seemed to go on forever. But the most special thing about Job wasn't his money or animals. It was his family. He had 10 amazing children, 7 boys who were strong and good, and 3 daughters who were beautiful and kind. The Bible tells us that Job's children loved to have parties together. They would take turns having big feasts at each other's houses, eating delicious food and laughing together. But Job was a loving father who worried about his children. Every morning after their parties, Job would wake up super early, even before the sun came up. While everyone was still sleeping, he would make a special fire and pray to God for his kids. "Dear God," he would whisper quietly, "maybe my children celebrated too much yesterday. Maybe they forgot to thank you or said something wrong. Please forgive them for anything they might have done." Job would offer sacrifices for each of his 10 children, one by one. He did this every single time because he loved them so much. Job didn't just pray because he had to. He prayed because he loved God so much. His life was perfect, and God had blessed him with everything good. Way up in heaven, something very important was happening. All of God's special angel helpers came to visit with their Creator. It was amazing. These angels were like living lights, perfectly made by God, and they were all worshiping the one who made all the stars and planets. But someone else showed up too. It was Satan, God's enemy, the one who tries to make people do bad things. While the angels were bright and full of joy, Satan was like a dark, mean shadow. "Where have you been?" God asked. Satan's voice sounded smooth but mean. "I've been walking around on earth, watching all those people, looking at all the wrong things they do. Have you noticed my friend Job?" God asked, his voice full of love and pride. "There's nobody else on earth like him. He's good and honest, and he loves me, and always tries to do what's right." Satan laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. "Oh, come on. Of course, Job loves you. Look at all the good things you've given him. You protect him like he's in a big, safe bubble. You've made him super rich." Then Satan said something really mean. "But if you take away all his good things, I bet he'll get really mad at you. His love isn't real. He only loves you because you give him nice stuff." Everything got very quiet in heaven. Then God said, "Okay then, you can take away everything he owns, but you cannot hurt Job himself." Satan smiled a terrible smile. It was like a big test to see if people can really love God even when everything goes wrong. Heaven was about to find out if Job's heart could love God not because of good things, but just because God is wonderful. The next morning started just like every other morning. The sun painted the sky with pretty colors, birds sang happy songs, and Job finished his morning prayers. But something terrible was coming. Suddenly, a worker came running toward Job's house, looking really scared. The man fell down in front of Job, breathing hard. "Master, bad men came like angry bees. The Sabaeans attacked us." They took your oxen and donkeys. They hurt the workers. I was the only one who got away." Before Job could even think about this bad news, another person came running. His clothes were black from smoke. "Master," he cried, "fire came down from the sky. It burned up all your sheep, all 7,000 of them. The workers too. I'm the only one left." A third messenger ran up. "The Chaldeans came like wolves. They took all 3,000 camels. Everyone is gone except me." Job looked like each word was hitting him hard. In just minutes, he had lost almost everything: his animals and most of his workers. But the worst news was still coming. A fourth messenger appeared, and his face showed this wasn't about animals. This was much, much worse. "Master," he whispered, "your children, your sons and daughters." He couldn't keep talking because he was too sad. "Please tell me," Job said, his voice shaky. "They were having their feast in your oldest son's house, laughing and having fun just like always. But then a huge wind came across the desert like a giant's fist. It hit the house from all sides. The house fell down completely. We dug and dug through all the broken pieces, but all 10 of them are gone. All gone." When Job heard this terrible news, he tore his clothes. He ripped his robe right down the middle to show how broken his heart was. Then he shaved off all the hair on his head, which was what people did back then when someone they loved had died. But what happened next was the most amazing thing anyone had ever seen. Job fell to the ground, but not because he was giving up. He fell down in prayer to worship God. Even though his heart was broken, even though he had lost everything he loved, Job chose to pray and praise God instead of getting angry or complaining. He willingly accepted everything that had happened to him. With tears running down his face, he said these powerful words: "I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave this world. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord." Can you believe it? Job didn't blame God. He didn't get angry. He didn't complain even a little bit. Instead, he prayed and worshiped God. Job willingly accepted all these terrible trials because he believed that God had a reason for everything, even if Job couldn't understand what that reason was. He trusted that God knew what he was doing. The Bible tells us that in all of this, Job did not sin or blame God. He accepted God's plan completely. Up in heaven, Satan watched with his mouth hanging open. His mean plan had failed, but Satan wasn't ready to give up yet. Satan went back to God and said, "Okay, so Job still loves you, but that's only because he's still healthy. If you let me make him really sick, then he'll definitely get mad at you." God said, "All right, you can make him sick, but you cannot kill him. You must spare his life." Satan left heaven and did something terrible to Job. He gave him painful sores called boils all over his body from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. These boils hurt really, really bad. Job had to sit in ashes and scratch his sores with broken pottery because they itched and hurt so much. Then something even sadder happened. Job's own wife said something really mean. "Are you still trying to be good and faithful to God? Why don't you give up and stop trusting God?" But Job said something very wise. "Why are you saying that? Should we only be happy with the good things God gives and never trust Him when things are hard?" Job understood something important. God has reasons for everything that happens, even when we can't see or understand those reasons. Job was willing to accept both good times and bad times because he trusted that God knew what was best. Even when his own wife told him to blame God, Job still didn't sin. He willingly accepted his painful sickness as part of God's plan. Then 3 of Job's friends came to visit him: Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. When they first saw Job, they were so shocked that they cried out loud. For 7 whole days, they just sat with him quietly. But then they started talking, and what they said made everything worse. Instead of comforting Job, his three friends started saying really hurtful things. They didn't know about God's plan or the test that was happening. Eliphaz said, "Job, you must have sinned. Good people don't have bad things happen to them." Bildad said, "Your children must have done something wrong too." Zophar said, "Just admit you've been bad, Job." But Job knew he hadn't done anything to deserve all this pain. He had always tried to love God and do what was right. His friends' mean words broke his heart even more. Job felt so alone and confused. He began to cry out to God, asking, "Why?" He said things like, "I don't understand what's happening to me." Job's heart was completely shattered. But here's the amazing thing. Even when Job was asking hard questions, even when he was crying and didn't understand, he never said God was bad or wrong. Job willingly accepted his suffering because he trusted that God had a reason for everything. Job said, "Even if life gets really hard, I will still trust and hope in God. I know that God is in charge, and He has the right to do whatever He wants. Even if I don't understand His plan, I still trust Him completely. God has a reason for everything, even when I can't see what that reason island." Job admitted that God knew things he didn't know. Even in his deepest pain, Job chose to pray and trust God instead of complaining or getting angry. What incredible faith! Even in his darkest moments, Job willingly accepted God's plan and held on to God with all his heart. Finally, God Himself spoke. God's voice was like thunder, and He asked Job many questions about how amazing and powerful He island. God said things like, "Job, were you there when I made the earth? Do you know how I control the oceans and the stars?" Through all these questions, God was showing Job that He is so much bigger and wiser than any person could ever be. God wasn't angry with Job for asking questions. He was helping Job understand that we can trust God even when we can't see His plan. Job realized something wonderful. "I had heard about you, God, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. I know that you can do everything, and nothing can stop your plans." I was talking about things I didn't understand. Then God did something that shows how much He loved Job. He told Job's three friends that they were wrong for saying mean things and that Job had been right to trust God. But the most amazing part was what God did next. He gave Job back twice as much as he had before. God blessed Job with 14,000 sheep. That's double. 6,000 camels, 2,000 oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. God also blessed Job 10 more children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. The Bible tells us that Job's daughters were the most beautiful women in all the land. Job lived for 140 more years. His life was full of joy and blessing. Job's story teaches us that sometimes we might not understand why bad things occur, but we can trust that God loves us and has a plan. Just like Job, we can willingly accept whatever God allows in our lives because we know He has a reason for everything. When hard things happen in your life, remember Job. Remember that you can still love God and trust Him, even when you don't understand. You can pray instead of complaining. Job shows us that we can have faith that cannot be broken.